picture this. You're completely out of bullets, your cover is just utterly blown, and the facility alarm is blaring so loud you can barely think.
Right, total chaos.
Exactly. 2 guards are rushing you. So what does James Bond do? He doesn't, pull some magical gadget out of thin air.
Nope.
Instead, he literally hurls his empty, smoking machine gun directly at a guard's head, sprints over the desk, snatches the guard's weapon right out of the air, and just keeps firing.
It's quite the visual.
It really is. So, welcome to the deep dive. Today we are answering one massive question for you. Is the highly anticipated new video game 007 First Light just like another generic third-person shooter stuffed into a tuxedo? Or is it the best James Bond experience we've had since GoldenEye?
Which is a very tall order, honestly.
Right. Oh, for sure.
To figure that out for you, we are synthesizing a massive stack of source material today. We've gone through in-depth video reviews from IGN, GameRanks, Joraptor, and L321, alongside some really comprehensive written coverage from the Cosmic Circus.
And of course, the overarching Metacritic consensus to see, where the dust is actually settling.
Right, because this isn't just any game studio taking a crack at the franchise.
No, this is IO Interactive, the team universally praised for the Hitman series.
They're the absolute masters of methodical, slow-paced stealth.
Yeah, so handing them the keys to the most famously explosive, loud, and destructive spy in cinema history is just a fascinating pairing. Okay, let's unpack this. Where do we even begin with a game of this scale?
Well, we have to begin with the most fundamental change they made, which happens before you even fire a single shot.
Right.
Before we look at how the game plays, we have to look at who you're playing as, because IO Interactive took a massive gamble with the character of James Bond himself. They completely avoided adapting any existing movie plot.
And they didn't just borrow the likeness of Daniel Craig or Pierce Brosnan either.
No, not
This
many.
is a full-blown, ground-up origin story. You're playing as a 20-something James Bond, voiced and motion captured by actor Patrick Gibson. And according to the reviews, he is fresh out of the Royal Navy, and he is, well, he's kind of a mess.
Mess is the perfect word. I mean, he is cocky, he is dangerously reckless, highly inexperienced.
He constantly clashes with his commanding officers, right?
Exactly. It's a radical departure from the suave, untouchable icon we usually see. But what's really striking across our sources, specifically highlighted by the Cosmic Circus, is how well it actually works.
How so?
Well, Gibson's performance manages to synthesize the best historical traits of the cinematic Bonds. Reviewers noted that his physical movement captures the raw, blunt force aggression of Daniel Craig.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but his dialogue delivery has the effortless, wry charm of Roger Moore, undercut by the very specific cold intensity of Timothy Dalton.
Wow, so a real blend.
Yeah.
But because he's so young and raw, he clearly can't carry the fate of the world on his shoulders quite yet, right? Like, the game surrounds him with this really robust supporting cast to kind of anchor him.
Yeah, he desperately needs role models at this stage.
So we get the character of John Greenway, played by Lenny James, who steps in as this incredibly gritty, grounded mentor figure.
Such a good casting choice.
Oh, brilliant. And even the new Q is portrayed very differently. Instead of the exasperated, hyper-caffeinated tech guy we're used to seeing, this Q is much more of a patient, steady father figure.
Which is a necessary narrative dynamic when your protagonist is essentially an arrogant rookie trying to find his footing in the high-stakes world of British intelligence.
See, I want to push back on that premise a little bit.
Okay, go for it.
For you listening, think about what you actually want when you buy a James Bond game. Isn't the whole fantasy of this franchise being the untouchable, perfectly tailored super spy who is always, like, 3 steps ahead of the villain?
Right, that's the classic expectation.
Exactly. So starting him off as an arrogant rookie who needs a mentor sounds a bit like putting training wheels on Superman. Does taking away that initial power fantasy actually work for the player?
What's fascinating here is how that exact vulnerability is the mechanism that makes the character's eventual confidence feel completely earned.
Earned, right.
Think about standard game design. If a developer just hands you a fully formed, untouchable super spy at minute 1, there's no character arc.
Right, there's nowhere for the narrative to go.
Exactly. By showing a deeply flawed Bond, a guy who makes tactical errors, who has to be explicitly trained, who is a bit too hot-headed during interrogations, the game ensures that his evolution into the iconic 007 feels deeply rewarding.
So you aren't just wearing the legendary tuxedo, the game makes you actively earn the right to wear it.
Precisely.
That does make sense. It's the difference between being handed the championship trophy and actually having to run the race.
Beautifully put.
But logically, to make that character evolution believable, the developers couldn't just throw him into a massive boss fight or a world-ending laser base right out of the gate.
No, that would be totally jarring.
They had to build a world that reacts to a rookie.
Exactly. And that requirement directly informs one of the most heavily debated aspects of First Light across all of our sources, which is the pacing.
Because it is incredibly deliberate.
Very.
This is a linear, 15 to 20-hour narrative spread across 17 distinct chapters. IGN and GameRanks both directly compared the pacing to a prestige TV series.
Yep, the slow burn.
To put in perspective for you, it literally takes over an hour of gameplay before you are allowed to go on your first real field mission.
It's wild. During that massive opening stretch, the game focuses entirely on world building and establishing the stakes.
Right.
You are exploring his surprisingly messy London flat, you are moving into the MI6 training camp set in Malta, and you're getting to know the intricacies of that supporting cast. The environmental density that IO Interactive built here is just staggering.
It really is. Joraptor's video review highlighted some amazing details, like you can wander around the MI6 headquarters and organically eavesdrop on incredibly well-written background conversations.
I love those little moments.
Right. And you can go deep into the Q lab and actually press buttons on experimental tech, which temporarily blinds Q's helpless lackeys as they try to work.
Poor guys.
I know. There's even a brilliant moment at the Malta training camp where you stumble across a busted-up 2006 Aston Martin test mule. And it's not glamorous at all.
Not even a little.
It is literally held together by plastic zip ties and covered in scratches from disastrous field tests. It's only on screen for maybe a minute, but that level of obsessive detail makes the world feel incredibly lived in.
That is world building through environment, which, as we mentioned earlier, is a hallmark of IO Interactive's pedigree. They are famous for the massive, intricate sandbox levels in the Hitman franchise where, every single room tells a story.
Right.
But here they're utilizing that same environmental density not just to provide clever assassination opportunities, but to build deep narrative immersion. They want you to feel the weight of MI6 as an institution.
I look at it like a 15-hour interactive binge watch. For you, the listener, if you're someone who is completely burnt out on those massive, bloated, 200-hour open-world RPGs where you have to complete endless, meaningless side quests just to level up.
Oh, we've all been there.
Right. This deliberate, highly curated pacing is actually a massive relief. It respects your time by giving you a focused cinematic narrative.
That is a very strong point, though we absolutely must note the critique that several reviewers brought up regarding this structure.
The filler episodes, yeah.
While the deliberate pacing works brilliantly for the world building, sources like GamerRanks pointed out that a couple of the later chapters feel noticeably padded.
Yeah.
They described them as feeling like filler episodes in a TV season, designed specifically to slightly stretch the overall runtime, but lacking the tight, propulsive thrill of the core narrative chapters.
Right, and nobody likes a filler episode when the stakes are supposed to be high.
Definitely not.
But eventually, the talking and the training do stop, and the actual spy work begins. And this brings us to the core gameplay loop, which is what everyone was really curious about.
Yeah, the moment of truth.
How does a studio famous for Hitman, a game entirely about methodical, patient, invisible stealth, design a game for James Bond, a character who is notoriously loud, destructive, and rarely subtle?
The consensus across the reviews describes the stealth mechanics in First Light as, quote, Hitman Light or Diet Hitman.
Diet Hitman, I like that.
It is essentially a hybrid system that pulls from several different gaming genres.
Yeah, watching the gameplay footage, it looks like they took the cinematic traversal, the ledge climbing and swinging of an Uncharted game, and smashed it together with the technological hacking of a game like Watch Dogs.
That's a great comparison.
You're infiltrating luxurious galas, stealing VIP invites out of people's back pockets, eavesdropping on targets to find new infiltration pathways, and causing localized distractions by hacking laptops or bursting steam pipes.
And to accommodate the specific personality of James Bond, they introduce a highly praised new mechanic called Bluff.
Ah, this is so cool.
It really is. In a standard stealth game, if a guard spots you, an alarm rings instantly, the entire base goes on high alert, and the mission goes sideways immediately.
Super frustrating.
Right. But in First Light, if certain enemies spot you in a restricted area, you can spend a specific in-game resource to have Bond execute a quick, quippy lie to talk his way out of it.
Which is such an iconic Bond thing to do. He just smooth talks his way out. Like, oh, terribly sorry, I'm just looking for the restroom, or pretending to be a lost journalist.
Exactly. Mechanically, it acts as a temporary cooldown on getting caught. It buys the player a precious few seconds to reposition themselves or to take the guard out quietly before the alarm is actually triggered.
Smart.
However, the stealth system does come with one very specific, archaic flaw that left almost every reviewer scratching their heads.
Oh man, yeah. We have to talk about the flaw. So unlike Hitman, the disguises in this game are strictly scripted for specific story moments. Right? You can't just knock out a random chef, steal his clothes, and walk into the kitchen. But bizarrely, you also cannot hide or drag unconscious bodies.
At all. You execute a perfect stealth takedown on a guard, and they stay right where they fell on the floor.
Let's really look at this, because I was baffled. A big-budget AAA stealth game in the year 2026, where you literally cannot hide a body.
It's definitely jarring.
Doesn't leaving a trail of unconscious guards in the middle of a brightly lit hallway completely shatter the master spy illusion? I mean, how can you call it a stealth game if you can't clean up your tracks?
On the surface, it seems like a glaring omission. But if we connect this to the bigger picture of the game's core design philosophy, it actually makes structural sense.
Okay, I'm listening.
This is a highly intentional choice by IO Interactive to force the pacing of the game. James Bond isn't Agent 47.
Right.
He isn't a meticulous, silent assassin who spends 20 minutes hiding in a closet or cleaning up a crime scene so nobody notices he was ever there. Bond leaves a massive mess, and he just keeps moving forward.
That's true. He does blow a lot of things up.
Exactly. By entirely removing the ability to hide bodies, the game fundamentally forces the player out of the shadows. It guarantees that eventually a patrolling guard will find the mess you left behind, the alarm will inevitably be raised, and the game will forcefully shift into high-octane action.
So it's less about remaining completely unseen and more about just delaying the inevitable firefight as long as possible.
Precisely.
Okay, I actually like that. It forces constant improvisation.
Yeah.
Because since you can't hide the bodies, you are going to get caught. And when the stealth inevitably fails, the game shifts gears entirely into this incredibly aggressive combat system.
And that combat system drew heavy praise.
Oh, yeah.
The melee combat is heavily inspired by the rhythmic counter-based systems we saw in the Arkham superhero games.
I noticed that.
It utilizes a similar parry and dodge structure, but where First Light truly shines is its heavy reliance on the surrounding environment.
It looks so punchy and visceral. You aren't just standing there throwing standard boxing jabs. You are actively grabbing enemies and smashing them into server racks to electrocute them, throwing them over balcony railings, or just grabbing whatever random object is sitting nearby.
Yeah, anything goes.
Coffee mugs, glass bottles, snooker balls off a pool table. If it's not nailed down to the floor, Bond's picking it up and hitting a bad guy in the face with it.
And that frantic improvisational feel extends directly into the gunplay. The game does feature a slow-motion focus mode for landing precision headshots, but it strictly limits your ammunition reserve.
Right.
You are constantly running dry in the middle of the fight.
Which leads right back to the scenario we opened the show with. My absolute favorite mechanic mentioned by IGN. When your submachine gun clicks empty, you don't just duck behind cover and reload.
No, you do not.
You press a button to literally hurl the empty gun at the bad guy's head to stun him, sprint over his desk, and steal his weapon midair to keep the combo going. It sounds like playing an interactive John Wick movie.
It creates a phenomenal momentum-driven combat loop. You might blind a group of mercenaries with a smoke gadget, take two out hand-to-hand using a chair, shoot an explosive barrel in slow motion, run completely out of bullets, throw your empty gun at the last guy standing, and tackle him over a table.
That sounds exhausting in the best way.
It really is. It's meticulously designed to make you feel like you are constantly surviving by the absolute skin of your teeth.
But speaking of gadgets, it does raise an interesting question. If you are constantly out of ammo and relying on throwing pool balls at people, where does Bond's famous arsenal of gadgets fit into this?
Right.
Because there was a serious gripe among the reviewers regarding how the tech is handled.
The gadgets themselves are excellent. You get the classic laser watch for cutting locks, a pen that fires miniature missiles, and a dart-firing phone that multiple reviewers noted is incredibly overpowered for instantly bypassing difficult stealth sections.
Oh yeah, the dart phone. But that created a massive design problem for IO Interactive.
Yeah.
How do you stop players from just spamming these overpowered gadgets over and over again to easily win every single encounter?
And their solution to throttling the player's power was highly criticized.
It was so bad.
To limit gadget spam, the game makes you frantically scavenge the environment for battery power and chemical components to recharge your gear.
It is so bizarre. You're running around in the middle of a firefight, picking up loose cell phones for their batteries, and you are literally searching for bottles of hand sanitizer and engine oil to use as chemicals for your gadgets.
It's a bit ridiculous.
Imagine James Bond in his tailored tuxedo having to rummage through a villain's janitor closet for hand sanitizer before he can save the world. It completely deflates the cinematic tension. It feels incredibly arbitrary.
The game design logic behind it is sound. I mean, they absolutely needed a mechanism to throttle the player's power level so the combat doesn't become trivial. But the reviewers universally agree that the execution here is remarkably clunky. The overarching consensus from channels like JoeRaptor and L321 is that a simple, invisible cooldown timer for the gadgets would have maintained the game's challenge while respecting the player's immersion far better than a forced scavenging mechanic.
Totally. The scavenging just feels like busy work.
Yeah.
So those are the core mechanics. We've looked at the characterization of a young Bond, the prestige TV pacing, the hybrid stealth system, and this frantic improvisational combat loop.
Yep.
But let's pull back. What is the final consensus on the complete package of 007 First Light, and what else is included for your money?
Well, to round out the package, the game does feature a highly replayable secondary mode called TACSIM mode, which stands for Tactical Simulator.
Yeah.
It operates out of a virtual reality hub in the Q Lab, where you can replay specific combat sequences with difficult modifiers, unlock permanent upgrades, and chase high scores on global leaderboards.
Nice.
It is a smart addition that adds significant replay value long after the core 15-hour campaign is over.
But the campaign itself is not without its whiffs. Across the reviews, a few consistent complaints popped up that we need to highlight. First, the driving.
Ah, yes.
A James Bond game isn't complete without an Aston Martin, but when you finally get behind the wheel of those iconic sports cars, the handling feels incredibly clunky and arcadey.
Which is somewhat expected. You know, IO Interactive is a stealth action studio, not a dedicated racing developer.
Sure.
It feels as though they bolted a very basic driving physics engine onto the game just to fulfill the franchise requirement, rather than building a nuanced driving simulator.
Makes sense, but still disappointing.
Yeah.
Additionally, the user interface drew heavy criticism, specifically regarding accessibility.
Yeah, the UI icons.
Right. The UI icons for selecting your gadgets and tracking your objectives are notoriously confusing.
Reviewers noted that the iconography relies heavily on abstract shapes and very similar color gradients rather than distinct high-contrast symbols.
Which is a huge problem.
It really is. They specifically pointed out that this presents a very steep learning curve for dyslexic or colorblind players trying to quickly select the right tool in the middle of a fast-paced fight.
There's also the classic big-budget gaming trope of yellow paint.
Ugh, the yellow paint.
Right. For you listening, if you aren't familiar with that term, yellow paint is when developers literally paint a ledge or a ladder bright yellow just to hold the player's hand and show them exactly where to climb.
It's everywhere these days.
A lot of players find it incredibly immersion-breaking, especially in a game that works so hard to build a realistic world. And sadly, multiple sources noted the final boss fight falls completely flat, describing it as a typical underwhelming bullet sponge cliché where you just shoot a guy 100 times until his health bar depletes, which just doesn't match the creativity of the rest of the game's combat.
But despite these flaws, you know, the clunky driving, the UI issues, and the weak finale, the overall critical consensus is highly positive. Yeah. Over on Metacritic, the game is currently holding a very strong 87 critic score, alongside an 8.5 user score.
Those user reviews are actually really interesting to dig into because they show a widespread of how different types of players are reacting to the game's modern sensibilities.
Definitely.
You have users like MWR97 calling it a guaranteed Game of the Year contender, saying that every single chapter feels like playing through a flawless, high-budget Bond movie.
And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have users presenting mixed scores, like The Truth Sleuth.
Right.
This user expressed deep frustration with the world building itself, specifically noting that the highly diverse demographic makeup of the characters inside MI6 didn't feel logically accurate to historical British intelligence.
Yeah, we saw a lot of that.
It is a critique that imparts no judgment on the gameplay itself, but rather reflects the ongoing broader online debates we consistently see surrounding how developers choose to modernize legacy cinematic properties for today's audiences.
It just shows how protective fans are of this 60-year-old franchise. So, what does this all mean for you? When you weigh the incredible highs of the visceral combat and the fantastic story against the padded later chapters, the weird hand sanitizer scavenging, and the relatively short 15 to 20 hour length, is 007 First Light actually worth a full price purchase?
For the answer to that, we should look directly to the analysis from L321's review, which heavily praises the game's strict quality over quantity approach.
I completely agree with that.
As we touched on earlier, we are currently in a gaming era dominated by massive, bloated, live service games and RPGs that demand 100 to 200 hours of your life just to see the end credits.
Right, the never-ending games.
In that specific landscape, releasing a tightly paced 20-hour cinematic adventure that tells a complete, respectful, and thrilling story without endless grind is a massive win. It is built specifically for players who want an exceptional, high-quality experience they can actually finish.
It's the perfect weekend game. You get in, you save the world, you feel like an absolute badass, and you don't have to quit your day job to see the finale.
Exactly. 007 First Light is not a flawless video game. The stealth has archaic limitations, and the gadget economy is pretty messy.
Yeah.
But IO Interactive has achieved something truly remarkable here. By taking the massive risk of combining an arrogant, inexperienced young James Bond with brilliant, prestige TV-level world building and a frantic improvisational combat loop, they've undeniably crafted the best James Bond interactive experience since GoldenEye released decades ago.
They took off the training wheels, they let Bond be a flawed rookie, and it absolutely paid off.
And
that leaves us with one final thought for you to mull over as we wrap up today's deep dive into the sources.
what's that?
If a developer like IO Interactive can so successfully deconstruct and rebuild a 60-year-old cinematic icon into a modern prestige interactive experience, what other stagnant movie franchises are sitting around out there?
Oh, that's a good question.
What other dormant cinematic heroes are just waiting for the right game studio to stop making lazy, generic movie tie-ins and start building rich, standalone interactive universes?
It is an incredibly exciting time to be a player, and it really opens the door for a lot of legacy characters to make a comeback.
It really does. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into 007 First Light. Keep asking questions, stay curious, and we'll catch you on the next one.